Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Hopefully you found the session of your choice. This session will be presented by Hiba Hussein, who's a planner, at Grey County, and she'll be speaking to the county's Climate Change Action Plan. Just a little bit about Hiba. Hiba is an urban planner working for the County of Grey on their Climate Change Action Plan, which she will be speaking about. Hiba has her master's in urban planning from the University of Toronto, and her goal is to bring individuals with different perspectives into the climate conversation. Hiba, if you're ready, I will turn it over to you.
Perfect. Can you hear me and can you see the presentation?
Yes to both.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you all for being here. And I just want to take a moment to thank Jason for being the lead in planning this conference and doing an amazing job moderating. He's done a fabulous job. So a virtual round of applause to Jason for being awesome. I just wanted to quickly mention, if you have heard me present, this is going to be a very similar presentation that I've given on other occasions, especially in our workshop and in box sessions. So this is primarily for individuals who aren't aware of what's happening with Grey County in our climate change action plan, but I encourage everyone to join. Majority of this presentation is going to be us having a conversation, so I'm really hoping that you'll be engaged and be able to provide a lot of feedback to myself. I did want to mention that I posted a link in the chat. I hope that everybody opens up that survey and fills it out as we go through. That's the kind of the interactive portion as well of this presentation. We're hoping that people who haven't had the opportunity to fill it out and really provide some feedback in that form as well. So I'm going to just maybe spend the next few minutes presenting or the next 10 minutes just giving a brief presentation. And Jason, if you can let me know when I have maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes left, I'm not sure what the changes in our timing when I'm supposed to end. So if you can just let me know, that'd be great. So the Grey County Climate Change Action Plan. So as this is a plan that was developed or started, really the conversation started with council and senior management team when we recognized that there was a need to address climate change. We were hearing from our constituents and the community that climate change is an issue. It's becoming more of a prominent issue globally over the last 20 years. And we wanted to be a leader and play a role in addressing climate change in our own county. So we recognize that this is some work that we need to do. So it really began in 2018 when I started doing some background research and trying to understand what's happening within our neighbors and within Southern Ontario widely regarding climate change. And that's kind of how this began. And from there, we realized that we needed a climate change plan that kind of identified a path forward for sustainable communities and really identified the gaps within our existing policy framework. So we knew that there's a lot that we were doing in terms of our other policies, which includes the cycling trails master plan, the recreational trails master plan, the county official plan. These are all plans that are coming into place or currently exist that kind of address climate change, but don't directly address climate change. So we knew that there's work that we're doing, but there's more that can be done. And we wanted to identify those gaps within the policies that already exist and then create a climate change action plan that address those gaps. The plan will ultimately, our goal is to have a results-oriented policy document that kind of looks at our GHG emissions overall, our greenhouse gas emissions overall, and then looks at how we can reduce that to really have an impact on mitigating climate change. And our goal ultimately when developing this plan is also to have a wide range of perspectives and priorities around climate change mitigation. So it's always to take into account the different stakeholders within our communities, the different sectors, and make sure that everyone's voices are being heard so we can have a collective impact on mitigating climate change. The climate change plan will be broken into two sections. We're going to be focusing on community emissions and corporate emissions. I'm primarily going to focus on community emissions because I think that's the one that most people are interested about. But I did quickly want to touch on the corporate emissions. When we first identified the need to have a climate change plan, we quickly realized that there's no way we can convince members of the community to take on the burden of helping mitigate climate change when we as a corporation aren't taking that leadership role. So it became very evident that we had to change our practices as a corporation to really make those changes. So this plan will have a primary focus on corporate assets and understanding how our corporate assets, our corporate departments can become more efficient, and that way we as a corporation can lead the community in becoming more efficient. In terms of the community portion of the plan, we've broken the portion down into 6 themes, and they include buildings, transportation, waste, agriculture, land use, and energy. And one that we've actually included informally over the last month is water. So through the initial conversations we've been having with public, we recognize that water is a huge concern to the public. As we've heard from Dr. Blair Feltman's keynote speak this morning, water is an issue, and as it's common in Grey County to be near water, we knew that we couldn't exclude it from our plan. But the caveat is that in most methodologies that assesses climate action, water is included in an adaptation plan, and it's researched and kind of the data is collected from an adaptation perspective. So most often when we're researching water and developing policies, they're included in an adaptation plans. The Grey County plan will focus is primarily a mitigation focused plan. So that was the initial reason why we chose not to exclude or chose not to include water as part of our key themes. But we knew that as we move forward, a key recommendation of this plan will be to look more in depthly into the impacts of water on our region or in our county, and really develop adaptation plans to focus on the impacts of water. So as I mentioned, there's 2 types of inventories. The community will look at our community emissions and look at how key sectors and stakeholders how much emissions they're producing, and how we can reduce our emissions within the community. And then a corporate inventory will capture emissions from our government operations and services and try to reduce emissions from that perspective. So as I mentioned, these are the 6 key themes we've identified, and ones that we've gone into in depthly. As I mentioned, we've decided to include water as well, but we haven't done an analysis, and we're still developing some policies. So that one's something that we are considering and looking into right now. But for now, we've done a lot of data collections and emissions analysis on these 6 themes, and so that's what I will be speaking to. Buildings. So the first theme is buildings, and the actions focusing on building is making sure that all of our buildings are more efficient and are built to a higher quality and take into consideration sustainability. So our focus here and policy focus here is to look at retrofit programs that encourage energy retrofits, so and encourage high efficiency builds. So any new development we want to encourage them to have a high efficiency and really take into consideration the impacts of energy. We want to bring awareness and specifically educate our development community about the importance of developing sustainably and how they can contribute and really mitigate some of the emissions that are produced. And then we want to support our businesses and commercial communities in becoming more efficient and becoming more energy efficient and taking on some of the sustainable practices. From a transportation perspective, we want to focus on supporting the adoption of electric vehicles and low emission vehicles. So this can include developing policies that encourage putting in more charging stations across our county. So there is the infrastructure for available when people move to an electric vehicle. So people don't have to worry about whether that infrastructure exists. So we want to try to help build in some of this infrastructure that can allow people to look at alternative sources than what is potentially creating more emissions. We want to promote safe and active transportation, so really encourage biking, walking, and really active transportation and multiple users on the road. One of the plans that we're really implementing and pushing forward right now is the Cycling Trails Master Plan, which looks at connecting trails from across the county, and really trying to get people to use our cycling infrastructure, not just for recreational basis, but also for to get to work in the morning and more utility purposes. So we really want to promote safe and active transportation, especially in our settlement areas. We want to work on educating and helping people understand the importance of reducing single occupancy vehicle trips. The more car sharing that we can do, the less burden is placed on our road systems, and the less we're emitting. So we're hoping to really create awareness about single occupancy vehicles and really kind of work on reducing that. And really speaking to the awareness and education of how our transportation practices contribute to emissions. From a waste perspective, we're looking to focus on, again, creating awareness and education around how our waste practices are contributing to emissions. We want to focus on waste diversion, and this can include our organics collection program. So really helping people understand where their waste is coming from, how much waste they're producing, and ways that they can divert that waste from the landfill. And we want to speak to municipalities about potentially developing an organics collection program, or finding ways to encourage users to do organics collections at home, and educating on that front as well. We want to look into ways that we can turn waste to energy systems. So there's been a lot of conversations about kind of using our waste to create fuel for vehicles, and this is all new technology. It's all new kind of ideas that are being developed in the private sector. So we're looking to see if we can capitalize on some of these new technologies that are being implemented, and see if it can benefit our county. From an energy perspective, we're looking to develop a community renewable energy project, raise awareness and education about the impacts of energy use on emissions, hopefully work with our utility companies to develop a district energy system, and identify local community energy resources, including waste heat, agricultural waste, solid waste, and wastewater. Our focus for energy is really to really create awareness around kind of how homeowners, business owners can really adapt a more sustainable energy use, and how our utility, and work with our utility companies to provide programming and funding to our community to really adapt some of those new technologies that are coming out that can help make homes and businesses more energy efficient. From a land use perspective, we're hoping to integrate climate change considerations into infrastructure planning, and preserve our local agricultural natural environments from development. We want to use our zoning bylaws and other planning tools to implement sustainable building and renovation practices. And really, the bulk of this will also be focusing on green spaces and community gardens and urban tree canopies, really working with municipalities to ensure that we have tree bylaws, and really working to make sure that our planning tools are there to preserve the green spaces that Grey County has been blessed with, and to ensure that it exists for the future. From an ag perspective, we're hoping to provide opportunities for peer-to-peer learning to educate farmers about best practices. A majority of the ag related policies we're looking to put forward is to really bring awareness around the impacts of climate change to the ag community, and how the ag community can adopt practices such as sustainable farming, no-till, pesticide, bring awareness to pesticide and herbicide use, soil conservation, carbon sequestration. So we want to bring awareness to different practices that the ag community can adapt to become more sustainable, and really look at what is currently already happening in the ag community, as there are a lot of practices that they're already implementing. So we want to support that work that they're already doing and really bring awareness and education on what they can do further. So just a brief overall, some program areas that we've identified include exploring opportunities for local renewable energy generation. We want to increase energy efficiency in all our buildings, including our corporate buildings and buildings within the community. Provide affordable and renewable energy options. We want to hopefully stimulate the local economy with new green jobs. So bringing in that technology, bringing in different jobs that really help support green infrastructure in our community. We want to design roadways that are safe and accessible for all users. So this goes back to really looking at active transportation and how we can have multiple users on the road at the same time. Expanding our local transit options. So as some of you might know, Grey County has just implemented a transit option, and we're looking to hopefully expand that, but also support our municipalities that potentially want to develop local transit options or have one right now, such as the city of Owen Sound. We want to support the use of zero to low emissions vehicles. This includes, as I mentioned, putting in infrastructure that can help or encourage users to buy more energy efficient vehicles. We want to expand initiatives to divert waste from landfills, so encourage the development of organics collections within our municipalities. Encourage sustainable agricultural management, and then preserve natural areas and significant environmental features. These are the top 10 that we've identified as areas of focus for our plan, but there's multiple other policy suggestions that we think are going to be critical in helping us achieve our goals of emissions reductions. So if you have any questions on these specific ones, I'm happy to answer that, or if we want to speak further to others, I'm happy to do that as well. So some of you might have seen the slide, but we're really hoping from a county perspective to hear from you and really understand what are your priorities for the community, where should Grey focus our efforts, and what actions would be most effective. So the survey that I've provided, you can include some of your answers there, but from a county perspective, we'd really like to hear from members of our community to see what they're seeing on the ground and what are their priorities for climate mitigation. So if anybody has any thoughts, I'd be interested to hear that now, and just kind of where you think we should focus our efforts. So feel free to jump in and just provide your feedback.
So we have about 10 minutes left in the session. Given that we're a little bit smaller group, feel free to just unmute yourself and you can speak verbally or use the chat function. Either works. I'll maybe ask Hiba first. Has there been any themes that have come out from the public engagement sessions? Any topics that seem to resonate with residents?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, water has been a huge one that people are concerned about, and rightfully so. So that's been one theme that we've heard quite a bit about, and one that we're looking to see ways that we can include it as part of our mitigation plan. So we want to kind of identify, work with our conservation authorities to identify how we can strengthen our mapping that really helps planners, prevent development from happening near floodplains areas. So really kind of work with our conservation authorities on that front, but also really look at education awareness policies as well. I think they do really help in making people aware, as Blair was saying, the importance of, the impact of basement flooding on homeowners, or even flooding in our streets. How can we mitigate that? Don't develop in certain parts of the county just because those are prone to flooding. So we really, really want to focus on education awareness as part of this plan in terms of water. Some of the other ones that have come out is natural preservation and our green space heritage preservation. It's one that I think we've already known is a priority for our community, but it's been further identified through our engagement. And there's a lot of work that we can do on that front. So again, strengthening our policies and our official plan to ensure that we are protecting our significant woodlands. We are protecting our wetlands, working with our ag community to potentially not drain those wetlands. So, there's been a lot that's come out of our conversation, and I'm very grateful because I think it's helped to understand that what we're seeing in the community and what our data is indicating are very aligned, and our solutions we're kind of all moving towards a similar solution.
So seeing a question in the chat, Hiba, have there been any steps taken at the county level to standardize waste or recycling programs?
From my knowledge, and we've had a bit of conversation on this, there hasn't. And again, I don't want to speak for council, so this would be something that is a recommendation that comes out of our plan and has to be kind of decided at county council, and kind of, it would be left to their discretion. But as of now, there is no conversation about standardizing waste collection. There hasn't been anything brought up at council or at senior management. So that's just one solution that we've put forward. I don't think it's the only one. There's a multitude of ways that we can divert waste without having to create a standard system across the county.
And a second question about an individual who's looking to put a new roof on their home. I'm wondering about insulation before the shingles go on, and if there are any government rebate type programs that you're aware of for that type of construction.
Not formally. I know informally of a program that's available through the provincial government, where I think if you retrofit, if you choose two options to retrofit your home. So for example, if you insulate your attic and you upgrade your furnace, there's a rebate that they give back. But I would have to look more specifically into the name of that program, and I can provide that after my presentation. But I know there is a program that's provided through the provincial government right now, just as my sister has upgraded her home and used that program. But I wouldn't know the specifics and the kind of the formal name of it, but I'm happy to look into any of those programs and provide that back to the group.
And do you have any sense, Hiba, about the budget investment on behalf of the county into these climate change initiatives?
No, so we've invested $50,000 to develop this plan, and then as part of the implementation of this plan, each policy initiative that we recommend will have a monetary value attached to it, and then it's ultimately determined by council which ones they choose to adopt. So we hope to tier off our implementation. So the first tier will be easy initiatives that don't require a lot of resources or funding to implement. So there are ones that we can do right away. And then the medium tier are ones that are potentially in the 2 to 3 years that require a bit of funding and resources, but not enough, but aren't a huge amount. And then the long term, or the third tier, will be projects that are 5 to 10 years that will require a significant amount of funding and investment to implement. So we're hoping to tier it off. That way there are smaller initiatives we can implement right away, and council will have the opportunity to kind of look at what fits with their mandate and their goals, or within their strategic plans, and implement it from that perspective. So we hope, as part of our implementation, to have this 3-tier structure, and then attach monetary values to each policy. That way there is kind of an awareness of the funding requirement moving forward.
And the final question that I'm seeing currently, are you aware of the term cyclical economy, which focuses on the intersection between consumerism and waste? So resource materials stay in the cycle and subsequently no waste. Is that something that's on your radar?
No, it's not. It's a term that I've heard being thrown out, but one that I haven't researched well enough to really speak to. So I'm happy to note that down and look into it further. But if there's someone on the call that wants to speak to it now, I'd be happy to hear some of their thoughts.
Joachim, I'll open the floor to you. You posed the question. If you have any information you want to share on that term or concept, feel free to weigh in.
Thanks, Hiba, for your presentation. We met earlier because I'm the chair of the climate action team. Well, actually, I don't know too much about all the details of cyclical economy, but it's basically focusing not on all the details like waste and stuff like this, but how we can keep things in that cycle. So it's not just education on one piece at a time, but to look at the big picture, how we consume, and how and all about our behaviors and attitudes around consumerism. And so we have an idea where things come from and where things go. But I actually have another question which has to do with agriculture, which is part of your action plan. So one big issue is that there's a lot of there are dynamics that are probably very different than what you intend. So for instance, suburban development, where developers build suburbs and housing on prime agricultural land, as you probably know, and often and usually scrape off all the topsoil, as well as taking all the trees out. Do you have any specifics around that? How you want to respond to that in the future?
Yeah, so you're just so that I understand the question correctly. So you're asking about how we're going to discourage developers from developing in our prime ag.
Exactly.
Correct?
Yeah, and also the practices
Yeah.
by taking everything off and taking all the trees down.
Yes, so there's been so since the 90s, there's been a huge push by the province to really protect our prime ag and really kind of make sure that we aren't, developing our resource that is so valuable to us, especially in Grey Bruce. So our policy, the provincial policies such as the PPS and the Planning Act explicitly state out that we can't develop in areas that have been identified as prime agricultural. Taking, as the Planning Act is legislation, and then the PPS is all of our policies, our official plans have to adhere to the planning, the PPS and the Planning Act. We have to implement that in our official plan. So our official plan has identified all the prime ag areas based on the mapping provided by the province. And we have very strong policies in our official plan that highlight the importance of preserving these areas, and further that no development, especially residential development, is permitted in these areas. So there is a lot of legislation and policies that are already in place that really protect our prime ag and really prevent development from happening. in reverse to that, there's a lot of policies also that really try to push development into our settlement areas to try to discourage development into our prime ag. And if there is any development that is proposed, there have to be a multitude of studies and kind of evaluations that they have to go through before it's even considered. So I think from an official plan perspective, there is a lot of strong policies that help us in discouraging that. So it's not one that we're particularly worried about through our climate change plan, but I do agree that we have to kind of make sure that we're really encouraging the densification of our settlement areas in order to prevent the movement into more of our ag areas. So the intensification is something that we're really going to encourage and really try to bring policies around education in our plan.
Potentially the conflicts may be between municipalities and the county, I guess, because I mean, agricultural land is still developed, like for instance, the one in Kilsyth, and I guess that's a municipal issue.
Our municipal plans would have to align with the county and provincial plans as well, but I'm happy to look into any specific examples that you have and really kind of go into it. But it's definitely something that we will consider as part of our plan.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
One quick question, Hiba, if you can wrap it up in 30 seconds, just around, have you considered long-term planning, like Sonia referenced around the ombudsman idea, something like, are you looking 50, 100 years down the road on this plan?
Yeah, so just quickly to that, we're hoping as part of our recommendation to hire a climate change coordinator that can really focus on in helping municipalities with their resources, and helping the county, really bringing us together to carry on some of this work. So we are hoping to develop a position, hopefully at the county, that can do some of that work. But long-term planning is a consideration of this plan as we're planning for 25 years. As part of our emissions target reduction.
All right, thank you very much, Hiba, for your time, for being responsive to all the questions that have come in, and thank you everyone for joining.